Welcome to the very, very first episode of what I am calling the Blightcast. The Blightcast is going to be a series where I give a very strong critical eye to things in the series. It's something that I normally stray away from, and I've recorded things at different points and I've just not released them. But I think, to be honest, if I'm going to share my appreciation of the series, then the least I can do is really share where I think it has gone wrong too. And I will say that this will probably be a mixture of very, very objective and subjective criticism, because some things matter more to me than other people, but some things I think will resonate with the broader audience. Here in the coming weeks, I am very helpfully going to be able to share the first episode of my Lost History series that I've been teasing recently. And before I do that, there's some things that I've had to change about my approach along the way of building out some of the ancient world according to just what we know from different games. And in my pursuit of being faithful, I started to observe things from Age of Imprisonment that didn't really hold up to scrutiny. And ultimately, it kind of changed my approach to how I built out the ancient world. And I went with something that was a little bit more general rather than being super specific about every detail. And a lot of that is because I want to be faithful, but again, there were some things that are very odd and interesting choices. And, goes without saying, I'm not here to try to beat up on it if you enjoyed that game. And I know there will be some eye rolls at the idea that I'm scrutinizing it this hard, but it's for a good reason. And it's a lot of it comes down to the fact that it is, and it was put forth as a canonical entry, and it's made me ask, what do they mean by that exactly? So I'm going to take a look at that with all of you today. I think a very logical place to start here would be the Great Plateau. One of the most interesting things about this is the experience of really walking up the Great Plateau in Age of Imprisonment, and having that experience of seeing this what has been put forth as an ancient version of the kingdom, basically. And when I didn't notice this initially until I actually started to figure out where things actually existed on the map, and that process was honestly, pardon my language, fucking brutal and painstaking. And it confused me because there are some things that contradict one another between maps, and I know that to a certain degree in Warriors games, we're all very used to use battle maps not being quite exactly right. Yet, to me, I think hand-waving away that they are just not expected to reflect what the game would look like in something that has been put forth as a canon entry does feel a little bit odd to me, but I'm not willing to die on that hill, I guess. Anyway, right away in that To the Great Plateau, that mission is interesting because it's called To the Great Plateau, but you're already on the Great Plateau, so where are you going? Anyway, you start off and you go across a bridge, and then there's a fast forward and you end up in a little sort of, interesting looking depression in the terrain. And then, and this is where Tyson gets taken over by a demon or something like that. And when he's done going all Lazy Horse Mattress Factory on everybody, you proceed your way upwards, and you basically cross the Temple of Time like you see it. You cross a bridge, and then that's where it ends. It's a very short mission, and it's one of the only missions where there's no actual complete battle map. There is a battle map that does appear when you're doing combat with against the Shades and trying to deal with what has happened to Typhon and whatnot. And naturally, I felt like that was a good place to start whenever I started to rebuild these things for the series. And this actually was born out of an even earlier effort to figure out where all of the battle maps actually took place in the game world, just because I am very curious and I enjoy that sort of thing. And I started noticing some strange inconsistencies. It really starts with, more than anything, with the entrance of the Great Plateau. In Tears of the Kingdom, one of the scenes where we can see in one of the memories of that encompasses the back side of the Temple of Time, and then you can see out of the corner the gate of the entrance to the Great Plateau. And it was around the point that I had rebuilt everything on the Great Plateau, except for really the gate and the entrance, that I start to pick this up. And what was going on, or what is going on there, is that Tears of the Kingdom has the gate in the correct place. It is the same place that it is in Breath of the Wild as well, Tears of the Kingdom. So in the Far Pass, it's like in the same place, but it was much more fortified, and that gate later ends up in the sky, and it may not be the exact same gate, but we'll just say like similar architectural style. How about that? And then when you actually start to play the game and you do the To the Great Plateau segment, when you go up the fountain incline towards the Temple of Time, that main gate also seems to confirm that the entrance to the Gate of Time and the decline down to the Hyrule Field or Hyrule Riverside or whatever, I don't know, it's in the right place as well. And then you get a little bit further, and then in Raging Sands, the gate and entrance is actually facing like literally like up down, perfectly vertical, straight. And when you play Battle for Hyrule Castle, you actually, when you get off the Stormwind Arc and you land, there is even more of that, where you're actually at a place that should be part of another level. And that would be the depression that I was referring to, where you meet Typhon in the Great Plateau, or to the Great Plateau. And there are like places that overlap there that don't fit at all. And again, you're supposedly starting on top of the gate that is the entrance, but it's also like perfectly north to south, completely perfectly. But every other cutscene contradicts that. So that's one of them. And then, it goes without saying that obviously where some of these places are featuring battles and whatnot, in any of the missions that are on the Great Plateau, the lower part, are in a place that is shown on the overworld map as being completely covered in water. And one of these places makes complete sense to me. And it's this body of water is actually visible in the Tears of the Kingdom cutscenes of the past. So it seems like this aligns really well. The overworld map seems to align really well with the intent of what the design was. And this leads me to a place where my thinking is, of course, that in order to make this playable and fun to be a Warriors game, they needed to, like, while the structure of the map may have been natural and could have worked inside of like a Wilds game context or a Zelda game context, it probably wouldn't have worked as well in a Warriors game. Maybe, I have no idea. Maybe you're at this point going, well, why does this matter? Why I think it matters may not be the same reason for you, so I'm not sure why I think it matters, at least for my own sake. Knowing that the Zelda team, Sid's Breath of the Wild, has built up an enormous amount of, let's just say, goodwill in terms of here's the basically the board. We've put a lot of things down. You can get answers to your biggest questions yourself if you look hard enough. And then, unfortunately, as time has gone on, that ethos seems to be kind of fading. And knowing that you have huge debates going on in the Zelda community about true founding versus refounding, whether Era of the Wilds is at the end of some place after the kingdom a previous kingdom was totally forgot, or whether Rara's kingdom is true founded or not. And there's so much debate about it, to the point where it's actually become really, really unhealthy in a lot of places, to be blunt. And knowing that people are going to be looking and trying to find references, and they've even done interviews saying that all this was planned out before Tears of the Kingdom released, and with the exception of the Warriors game, is the result of Koei Tecmo approaching Nintendo and asking them to take on the project. All of this is planned out, and there's presumably 7 years almost of time before even the Warriors game comes out, like Age of Imprisonment comes out. So there's all this buildup, and then knowing people are going to be looking for the details, things are just completely set up in the wrong places. And it only gets really worse from here, actually, unfortunately. And I think continuing along lines of Raging Sands, I think that's a good logical place to continue. Raging Sands is one of the most interesting missions to me because you see some really, really cool stuff that actually could give supporting and connective tissue to the state of the world leading into Ocarina of Time. And what I mean by that is, you of course start in Hyrule Field, and there are rivers lining the Great Plateau and whatnot. And towards the end, you cross into a canyon and things start to look more like a desert, and it ends with a giant Molduga fight. I think where this becomes kind of a struggle for me is the overall map in Age of Imprisonment itself, as well as the map in the Secret Sunroom in the back of the Forgotten Temple, still show things like the Rochencia River and the Tomio River in the places that they were. It makes complete sense. Rivers take a long time to form. And then you're like crossing into a canyon where there's not even a river crossing, so okay, maybe I can rationalize this as there's an underground river there that hasn't broken through, and that could be the case. I mean, there's certainly no shortage of underground rivers in the real world or within Legends of other games, so maybe that's the case. But then you're having a Molduga fight, which is essentially, more or less in a place that it's currently built up incredibly high on one side because it's largely kind of eroded over time, and this is supposed to be part of a desert, and that can make some sense because the western part of Hyrule, the Ocarina of Time, is pretty desertified, and when you consider that in the Era of the Wilds games they mention things like cataclysmic droughts happening, the A Link to the Past prologue mentions droughts happening around that time, so it kind of works. But then it falls apart in these other places where like they're showing you into the gateway of the desert, and you can actually look off to the side during that Molduga fight at the end of Reaching Sands and see the edge of the Great Plateau and the rock formation where the Colosseum, the ancient Colosseum is. You can actually see it, and it's like right there. It is so completely incongruent with the map that if you're sitting there trying to figure it out, you're not going to be able to easily without spending a lot of time doing it. And after that cutscene, there's more of that kind of thing happening. Because after you complete Raging Sands, then you have this follow called the Hands of Evil, where Kamo and the Night Construct are in more or less the Richlands and Western Hyrule, and you go up to this flat where you end up having a face-off with Twinrova and rescue Artie, and, again, me being me, trying to place these battle maps and figure out what's going on. I'm looking at the landmarks, and you can see things. You can see things off in the background. Granted, they're like these 2D billboards of what the terrain actually is, and that's okay. It works. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just is the idea correct kind of a thing is what matters more to me here. And you can see Mount Satori at the end of Hands of Evil. And if you look at the background, you can see Mount Hebra. And this is where it starts to really fall apart for me. Mount Hebra, the billboard for it, the 2D flat image from Era of the Wilds, not actually the Era of Wilds, it's probably from Age of Calamity, let's be honest, that has a hole in it, is actually present. So if you're one of those people who is like, okay, so allegedly the hole in the peak on Mount Hebra happened during the Ancient Calamity, 10,000 years before Breath of the Wild, and you're not expecting that to be there. It makes you go like, oh, what if that's not even true? How do you even know? It's not, but it's actually the same asset, and if you go and play Age of Calamity and examine it, it's the exact same graphics, so it wasn't even really changed at all. And I wish that I could say that those are the only things that happen that are like this. Unfortunately, there is more, and some mind-boggling stuff that goes with it. The Lener wetlands as a whole map is one of probably my most favorite areas as I get into Imprisonment, because it's just, it's fun, it's scenic, and you get to look around at so many different things, and it's just kind of cool. A problem, though, with that battle map is you start out, if you play the complete one, the complete mission where you actually end up fighting Grim Turok, and you start on a slope, and it descends into the wetlands, and you kind of make your way down an initial path, and then you enter into the wetlands where it's kind of concentrated roughly where most of the islands are concentrated in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And like the battle map goes through where a major portion of those islands are that exist on the overworld map of Age of Imprisonment and on the Wilds maps. And it's like it just goes through this area, like it's just a flat plain in this area. And this shift is kind of mind-boggling to me, actually, because the terrain was already there, and it was more or less enough of a similarity that they could have just worked with what was there, but then you have that happening. Anyhow, the other problem is that the fossils that are on this map in Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom some of them have been put in where they're at because they were scavenged by Lizalthos and the Blins, and they're in the exact same place. The exact same fucking place that they were in those games. They weren't even moved at all. And the craziest thing about this is that the bone assets that sit there are actually not part of the terrain. So it's not like you would have to modify the entire terrain in order to move them. They are just actor positions. So you could move them around, rotate them, anything like that. How do I know? Because I placed all the goddamn fossils recreating the ancient surface, so I could understand where they were at, so I could be really thorough in my own research. And they're the same thing. But yet, all that detail is missed. But in the far background of the same level, you can actually see the infamous blue stone that supposedly Zora's domain was carved out of, the single blue stone. You could see it up behind, and then if you look even further back, I swear if I go in the same place in my Breath of the Wild Tears of the Kingdom, you could see Mount Lener there. And that one layer was covered in this blue stone, and that makes complete sense to me. That's something I honestly expected. So the attention to detail is there, but then it's missing from these battle maps in ways that are like mind-boggling in terms of what the world actually should be. The Damal Forest missions after this, honestly, largely suffer from some of the same kinds of things, where, if you go according to the overworld map, the Trickazor River is there. And then, if you use the Damal lightning rods to actually determine where that battle map is, and you get it placed, one thing you're going to find out really, really quickly is that parts of the river that are supposed to be open according to their own map are actually just hard ground and open paths. This is also really perplexing for a number of other reasons. While some of the older style Zenai ruins are definitely like replicas, like they're actually covering up the Sky period or Celestial periods of my ruins. And most of those replicas are really at access points or places where things were retrofitted after the fact. But beyond that, there are rooms from the early point of the Zonai civilization that are supposed to be there, and most of them are definitely missing. And we can easily confirm this because Minoru comments in one of the side quests about wanting to go like Typhlo ruins and see the owl statues, those owl statues. And we have semi lightning rods that are in their Celestial period style of the white stone covering the structure and so on and so forth. And then all the other ruins are missing. So if you're trying to actually examine this game for details and build theories upon it, if you're interested in doing that sort of thing, and Zelda is quite honestly pretty fun to theorize about, you're kind of just left in the dark. And then the battle map itself doesn't really work. It doesn't align with the Trickazor River at all. And I know you mean like it's just a dry riverbed and the level takes place at the length of that river. It's just like somebody literally, and I'm sure this is exactly how it happened, literally took and scaffolded a bunch of 3 miles and assets right over the top of the actual map to take advantage of like the trees and things that were there, because they take hours to get them all down and make everything look right. And it just seems like they basically go power over the top of it rather than working with what was there. And frankly, I kind of think when you have something as cool in it, like a serpentine Trickazor River, there's a lot of fun things that could have been done with that. I feel maybe it just, some of the stuff didn't survive playtesting. I have no idea. I can't pretend to know. But that's another case where if you're looking for details and wanting to build theories that way, it's going to be really, really challenging. And I think finally, to cap off my complaint session about the maps in this game, and why I feel frustrated that they've kind of built us up towards an expectation and then did this game with Goitek mode and just didn't really deliver at the standard of quality for something that's called Canon. I think the Labyrinths are a good one. So the Labyrinths definitely exist before this point. And we know this because of Zelda notes, and where I was talking about them and saying how each one has a sort of spirit that inhabits it, and a spirit. It takes on a different type of a role, and it's a different animal, like owl, boar, and dragon, and it's associated to a virtue of the Triforce and whatnot. And then, of course, Tears of the Kingdom has also had a fairly interesting reveal in this idea of there being this versions of these labyrinths that exist probably from the depth to the sky. I think this is why I really have started to doubt the overall map in that game the most, is that there's an island in the northeast, and it's a really cool island, and for what it's worth. And I think the issue is that when taking it to scale, because the map is definitely heavily inspired by the way that the Wilds map appears, you can tell that from looking at it, there's no way that the surface version of Lummi Island Labyrinth actually could have ever fit on that island. And in fact, if you actually go up to it, swim over to it instead of taking a boat, walk around it, it sits on kind of like a sandbar that looks like it was heavily manufactured or manicured. And if you insert the scales technology for the Zonai, not a big deal. It kind of, it could suffer from a little bit of video game world syndrome, maybe. But, there's supposed to be this pyramid there, and art pyramid, goodness gracious, labyrinth there. And it doesn't fit, and not only that, there's not even a sign that like it could have fit, because the thing about the Age of Imprisonment map is there's not enough. You can't use the like we can with the Wilds map, where darker on the surface usually means at a greater a reduced elevation, and like brighter means at a higher elevation. But you can put this together because like fun fact, for every like, I don't know, so many pixels, it actually represents like so many meters. Like there's I Owen had to link this in the description because I'm spacing on it really bad. But on the Wilds map, all of the contour lines and like elevation lines that you see, they actually do correspond to real heights. It's not contrived. It's actually real. They did a really good job with this. So you can determine from the length of the darkest parts of a map in Age of Imprisonment, you can actually figure out what the elevation of different places are because of that kind of thing. And the problem is that this island looks like it might have been either a dormant volcanic cone that died, which makes sense because the Elden region is a volcano machine, or it was perhaps an earlier access point into the depths because of the chasm there, although it's closed off completely as we know. But either way, you're not fitting a fucking labyrinth island on that at all. And it's just one of those things, like, if Zeller Notes was made specifically to provide glue between Tears of the Kingdom and Age of Imprisonment, you can tell us by listening to the notes and how many references and Easter eggs there are. But then you have this type of stuff where it doesn't glue together at all. Like, what the fuck is this? So all this said, what is actually the part of this game that is canon? Frankly, it's down to the writing, and I feel like there are some moments that were genuinely exceptional in the writing of Age of Imprisonment, and I think it fits incredibly well. There's the infamous Fujibayashi quote about something that was destroyed before, and then we find out that there was the sundering of the Zonai by their own technology, and they may have been responsible for it by being too careless with it. Fantastic stuff. Love that. 11 out of 10. No notes. But there's not enough of it to go around when you consider that it is a game that's priced at the new pricing model for Nintendo Switch 2 games. There's almost no real original assets in the game except for the castle, and the castle models most heavily existed in Tears of the Kingdom. Even supposedly for being ancient, most of the assets in the game are just taken from Era of the Wilds. I think where I feel like this really suffered the most is in the Gerudo region, where once you get past this initial opening and you see this castle and it's all this ancient architecture and everything, and then you get into like Raging Sands and subsequent missions, you end up with this thing where it's the exact same fabric patterns on the tents, the exact same models for half the things are just identical. And most of the stuff, most of the Rito architecture in the Heber mission is just recycled as well. And though there are some neat new things in there, like burnt totems that are super cool, and I think that they give some glimpses into potential history of the Rito. Spoiler for upcoming series for that one. But it's just kind of disappointing because essentially did people pay, according to US currency, $70 US to pay for a canon story? And if this is supposed to be a canon story, then I think I have a lot of problems with it. For starters, God, if this isn't actually a canon story, then here's what is true on paper. This game, Tears of the Kingdom, and Tears of the Kingdom Masterworks all very pointedly state that Raro and Sonia are the first king and queen of Hyrule, regardless of my personal beliefs on it. what it is, and after examining a lot of stuff across the series and trying to figure out like how does this fit, doesn't fit, can it fit, it does nothing to really actually make any of that stuff fit at all. Because let's be honest here, a common refounding argument that I've heard is that it can't be because it doesn't fit, and that's on the high side of the evidence at least. And obviously, if Nintendo is going to, if they're not really the first king and queen, where's the rug pull? Why are they going to the lengths that they're going to assert that this is true? Why are they doing that? And even if this is like a totally in the universe kind of thing, where the characters believe what they're saying and they don't know that something came before it, that's also mind-boggling too, because the inherent divine responsibility that the Hylians carry to protect the Triforce and thereby the world. You can't have a state where you forget everything but then retain that mission. And the reason I'm saying this is because if this actually fits for real, and this is really true founding, then why does the timeline still show the imprisoning war happening between Ocarina of Time and Link to the Past? It canonically does not happen before any other branch of the timeline at all. That is a true statement. And I believe, personally, that in a true founding scenario that I could see that there's a lot of sense that this makes to actually have this story and this imprisoning war and everything be there. And it kind of sets up some really good stuff from like if you're like thinking at it more broadly and coming back after 40 years of the series and going, okay, well what would be so much cooler, like what could we revise if we could and whatnot. I think that it can make some good sense there, but there's no glue at all. There's not even a fucking morsel of a hint that it actually comes anytime after Skyward Sword, but before Ocarina of Time. Everything is completely inferred from circumstantial evidence, so there's no way to answer the question definitively. Even within when I say that I've examined this, myself and others have almost a 500 fucking page document examining the topic, and there is no definitive answer that isn't from circumstantial evidence at all, other than Robert and Sonia have asserted this, and the games have asserted this. That's it. So what are we even getting the canon of? Is any of the wild stuff, the Imprisoning War, Age of Imprisonment, Skyward Sword, is it even the same fucking timeline as the other games at this point? And now we're a decade in, and we have no answer about any of that at all. Like, it's a decade in on Breath of the Wild, and we have no fucking answer about what any of this stuff is. And I think it's really kind of soured how I feel about it. It's not going to stop me from continue to do history and research and share cool stuff. Like, I'm still going to cover the ancient history according to Skyward Sword and what we've seen in Air of the Wilds, because it's fascinating to me, and I hope somebody else finds it fascinating too. But it has really, really, really soured me on wanting to do research for future mainline games, because it is looking more and more like they're trying to turn the series into an Elden Ring style mystery box where there's never an answer to anything. And even at the points where you get these like glimpses of wherever some really cool canon components are, it's so short-lived and minuscule that it feels like being breadcrumbed. If you've ever been in a friendship, relationship, or whatever where you're being breadcrumbed, it feels like being breadcrumbed. That's the best way I can put it. You do things like play repeatedly like the same couple of battle maps, and there isn't a lot. It's like we're going like maybe 15% of all of Hyrule, and they showed us the stuff that is like, a lot of cases, frankly, half of it's the least interesting parts of the entire world. And you do this, and you do these same maps over and over again. Half of them, the localized names for the missions are not even all that interesting. It's just variations on purge the X, cleanse the Y, and that kind of thing. Just to unlock some those conversations in the hope that, like, okay, cool, this is gonna be it. There's gonna be where there's gonna be some cool reveals, right? And you spend all this time doing this, and frankly, unlocking some of them is fucking excruciating. Just for it to be like Kino complaining about not being good enough, and then Zelda responding by fucking simping Link, which I'm sure that appeals to somebody, but like, come on. I think the most revealing thing that actually comes out of the bonus conversations is that you find out that there was once a royal, or rather, Raru and Minoru do a song and a dance routine that is shown in the royal court at a banquet, and it's actually based off an older Zonai tradition, which would really provide a lot of pointers to the idea that before the Zonai civilization fell, Rara and Lener were probably nobility in some way, whether either directly descended from a former Zonai kingdom king, or through like a noble house or something like that. That's it. That's as good as I think it gets. The rest of the bonus conversations are the most boring shit that you will ever hear, ever. Like, Tears of the Kingdom Masterworks asserts that Rara Zonia did have a child, possibly even several. This was the place to show it. And where is this child? Like, is it even real? Now that I've gotten it off my chest, I will say that there are still some things that I enjoyed about the game. I've found most scenes with Lemalia to be really comedic. Are going down like the I don't know, full-on cycling alt-right conspiracy theories pipeline type conversation about how people from the depths steal people's faces, and witchcraft and sorcery from the desert could be responsible for Phantom Zelda, which is, it's not wrong, but it's just the way that she says it and how she like basically is doing like the chain smoking equivalent of like conspiracy theories is hilarious to me. Love it. And even getting to see and experience the few areas that were done really, really well for like a miniature Hyrule. I think Hebra is a gem. I think that they really do a great job with that, probably more than anything else. And the Gruher Desert's actually pretty good too, I would say. Beyond that, though, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't be so bothered if the Zelda team had not given interviews spinning a decade. Getting the fandom to actually expect and anticipate a certain level of quality with everything. And I think my earliest warning signs go back to the depth and the scale of embedment of like Hylian alphabet and Sheikah alphabets in Breath of the Wild. If there's text on something, unless somebody literally made a mistake and nobody ever caught, it says something. And then, you know, we get it. The warning sign to me was getting into Tears of Kingdom and seeing, you know, the Zonai rooms where, by my analysis and my best efforts, it's like, it seems like it was real at some point, maybe. And then it just fell apart, and it's inconsistently applied, and it just starts to kind of go away from this whole thing of, we're revamping the series into something that's going to be better. This is the bar. And then we're 1.5 games into it, and they're not meeting the bar. It's just confusing to me. Or it's not confusing. It just, I don't know, layers of disappointment and a whole bunch of other stuff stuck into a blender. That's all I have to say today. If you made this far, as always, thank you, and I will see you all next time.